The night air in Tonda, Manila was thick with heat and the constant hum of the city that never truly slept. Neon lights flickered in the distance, motorcycles roared past narrow streets, and somewhere below, a radio played an old love song, slightly out of tune. On the rooftop of a weathered apartment building, Miguel Reyes stood barefoot on cracked concrete, his eyes closed, his chest rising slowly as he prepared to sing. This rooftop was his sanctuary. It was the only place where the noise of life softened enough for his heart to be heard. Miguel had grown up here, surrounded by crowded alleys, rusted gates, and homes stacked tightly together like they were holding each other up. His parents worked long hours, his father as a jeepney driver, his mother doing laundry for other families, yet money was never enough. There were nights when dinner was just rice and salt, nights when the power went out and the city fell into darkness. But even in those moments, Miguel sang. His voice was never trained, never polished by teachers or studios. It was shaped by experience, by struggle, by listening to old ballads on borrowed phones and church choirs on Sundays. On this particular night, the moon hung low over Manila, casting a pale glow across the rooftops. Miguel's younger sister sat near the doorway, hugging her knees, pretending to do homework but really listening to every breath he took. His mother stood quietly behind her, hands clasped together, afraid to interrupt the fragile moment. They all knew something important was coming. Miguel had told them earlier that he had been given a chance, an audition far away, in a place he had only seen on television. America's Got Talent. The words still felt unreal. As Miguel began to sing, his voice floated into the warm night air, steady but full of longing. It wasn't loud, yet it carried. Each note held pieces of his life, the exhaustion of his parents, the laughter of his sister, the pain of watching dreams slip away from people he loved. His voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from emotion. He didn't stop. He never did. For Miguel, singing was not about perfection. It was survival. Neighbors leaned out of windows, drawn by the sound. A man across the street paused his cigarette. A woman hanging laundry stopped mid-motion. For a few minutes, Tonda listened. The city that was so often ignored, so often judged, was breathing with him. Miguel didn't see them, but he felt them. He felt connected, like his voice belonged not just to him, but to everyone who had ever hoped for something more. When the song ended, he opened his eyes slowly. The city was still there, messy, loud, imperfect, but something inside him had changed. His mother wiped her tears without a word. His sister smiled, her eyes shining with pride. Miguel looked out toward the distant skyline of Manila and imagined a stage with bright lights, a crowd he couldn't see, and judges who didn't know his story yet. That night on the rooftop, Miguel Reyes wasn't famous. He wasn't confident. He was simply a Filipino boy with a voice full of truth, standing between fear and hope. And as the city of Manila whispered around him, one thing became clear: no matter where life took him next, his voice had already begun its journey beyond these rooftops, carrying the heart of the Philippines with every note. The theater felt impossibly large to Miguel Reyes as he stood just behind the curtain, the bright glow of the America's Got Talent stage spilling onto the floor in front of him. His palms were damp, his heartbeat loud in his ears, louder than the murmuring audience beyond the walls. This was nothing like the rooftop in Tonda, nothing like the quiet nights in Manila where the sky listened without judgment. Here, every seat was filled, every camera ready, every second waiting to decide his fate. A production assistant gave him a gentle nod. "You're up." Miguel took a deep breath and stepped forward. The applause greeted him politely, curious rather than warm. He could feel thousands of eyes on him, but what unsettled him most were the judges' table lights. Simon Cowell sat in the center, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Miguel had seen that face on television so many times back home in the Philippines. Now it was real, only a few meters away. When asked where he was from, Miguel's voice trembled slightly as he said, "Manila, Philippines." He spoke briefly about his family, about singing on rooftops, about how music was the only thing that made life feel lighter. There was no dramatic speech, no rehearsed lines, just honesty. The audience listened, but no one yet knew what was coming. Then the music started. The first note left Miguel's lips softly, almost fragile. It hung in the air, unsure of itself, like a question. The room, once restless, began to quiet. By the second line, his voice grew steadier, warmer, filled with a depth that surprised even him. He forgot the cameras. He forgot the judges. He forgot America. In his mind, he was back in Manila, singing for his family, for his neighbors, for every dream that had ever felt too far away. As the song unfolded, something shifted in the theater. People leaned forward in their seats. A woman in the audience pressed her hand to her mouth. Miguel's voice carried pain, hope, gratitude, and longing all at once. It wasn't perfect. There were tiny cracks, moments where emotion overtook control, but those imperfections made it real. Every lyric felt lived, not performed. Simon Cowell, known for his skepticism, slowly uncrossed his arms. His eyes stayed locked on Miguel, not blinking, not smiling, simply listening. Other judges exchanged glances, sensing the same thing: this was more than just a good audition. This was a story being told through sound. As Miguel reached the final chorus, his voice rose, not in volume, but in feeling. It filled the space between the seats, the stage, the judges' table. The last note lingered longer than expected, trembling slightly before fading into silence. For a brief moment, no one moved. That silence was heavier than applause. Miguel stood frozen, unsure if he had failed or succeeded. Then the audience erupted. Cheers, whistles, people standing to their feet. The sound crashed over him like a wave. His eyes widened, and for the first time, tears threatened to fall. He bowed his head, overwhelmed. He had walked onto the stage as a boy from Manila with a dream. In that moment, standing under the lights, he realized his voice had crossed oceans, and people had truly heard it. Miguel Reyes stood center stage, the echo of applause still rolling through the America's Got Talent theater like distant thunder. His chest rose and fell quickly, as if his heart was trying to catch up with what had just happened. He looked out at the sea of faces, all standing, all clapping, and for a second, he felt weightless, like the boy from Tonda, Manila had stepped into someone else's life. As the noise slowly settled, all eyes turned to the judges' table. Miguel's gaze followed, finally resting on Simon Cowell. Simon was quiet. He hadn't reached for his pen or leaned back in his chair like usual. Instead, he sat forward, elbows resting on the table, his expression serious but softened in a way rarely seen. The room waited. Simon took a breath before speaking. "You know," he began, his voice calm but deliberate, "we hear a lot of singers on this stage." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the audience. Miguel swallowed hard. "Most of them sing very well," Simon continued, pausing as if choosing his words carefully. "But very few of them make me forget that I'm judging a competition." Miguel felt his eyes burn. Simon looked directly at him. "What you just did wasn't about hitting the right notes. It was about telling the truth. I believed every word you sang." The audience responded with another wave of applause, but Simon raised a hand gently, wanting the moment to stay focused. "Your voice has pain in it, but it also has hope. And that combination is incredibly powerful." Miguel nodded, unable to speak. His hands trembled at his sides. "I could hear where you come from," Simon added. "Not just the Philippines, but your life. Your family. Your struggles. You didn't try to impress us. You just shared who you are. And that's why this worked." His eyes glistened slightly under the stage lights, a detail not lost on the cameras or the crowd. One of the other judges leaned in, praising Miguel's authenticity, but it was Simon's words that stayed in the air. He smiled faintly now. I think the world needs voices like yours, he said. Because they remind us why music matters in the first place. The audience rose again, louder than before. Miguel covered his mouth, tears finally escaping. He thought of his mother watching from Manila, his sister sitting too close to the screen, his neighbors gathered in small rooms and streets, cheering as if he were their own son. In that moment, the distance between America and the Philippines disappeared. Simon leaned back, pressed the button, and nodded with quiet certainty. It wasn't just a yes, it was recognition. Miguel bowed deeply, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Thank you." He walked off the stage knowing his life had changed, but more importantly, knowing his story had been heard. He hadn't just sung for a chance to win. He had sung from the heart, and that had reached far beyond the room.